Have you noticed that tipping has become a ubiquitous part of our purchasing experience?
Tipping culture has gotten out of control. I get up to the pay window and she's like, how much do you want to tip? What am I going to tip you for? I'm in the drive-thru. Oh my God.
Back in the 1950s, tipping was usually around 10%. But nowadays, people are tipping anywhere from 15 to 25%. In fact, a recent survey found that the average tip was over 21%. And some folks argue that 20% is too low. Now, whilst the percentage of people tipping at full-service restaurants has stayed the same, the number of tips given at restaurants has gone up 17% in the fourth quarter of 2022. And the frequency of tipping at quick service places like coffee shops and fast food chains have gone up 16%. This phenomenon is known as tipflation, and it's affecting all kinds of businesses. Nowadays, we're being presented with tablets that ask us how much we want to tip, replacing those old-fashioned tip jars we used to see. And these tablets are suggesting the tips amounts right in front of the employee receiving the tip, as well as your dinner date and dozens of other people behind you in line. It's getting a little out of hand. It's not even just about the tablets. Even apps are getting in on the action. When booking on most service-based apps nowadays, they'll add around $6 to $10 just because it assumes that you want to add a tip. You have to go back a page manually and opt out. It's just one more example of how the tipping culture has gotten out of control. Tipflation is a term that refers not to just the fact that we're tipping more, but that we're tipping everyone for everything. It's getting to the point where we're being guilted into tipping for something that's not even a service, someone just doing their job. And let me tell you, customers are feeling a little resentful. So where do we draw the line? You might be surprised that the word tip actually stands for to ensure promptness. Tipping may go as far back as the Roman era, but most experts think that it likely has origins in medieval Europe. Noblemen taking passage on roads would throw coins to the rubble to ensure safe passage. One theory is that it evolved in eating and drinking establishments as a way to forestall envy, that when you're eating and drinking and having fun, the people who are serving you aren't. Fast forward to the 19th century, when waiters who received a full wage went on strike demanding higher wages. They were replaced with women whose employers could pay less. A decade later, there was a population of newly freed slaves. The idea from these restaurant owners is that they were giving the luxury or privilege of a white person's tips. That was without a full wage. Ironically, as tipping exploded in the United States, it became less common in Europe and was replaced with service charges. And whilst the federal minimum wage law passed in 1938, it wasn't until almost 3 decades later that the tip minimum wage was established. In 1991, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees was set at $2.13, which is what it remains as of March 2023. That's just ridiculous. As far as I know, the United States is the only country that exempts tipped workers from having to receive a full minimum wage. In fact, in 43 states in the US, it's legal to pay tipped workers less than the standard minimum wage because it's assumed that tips will make up the difference. But the tipping game has changed in recent years, especially during the pandemic. When the service charge industry took a big hit, consumers started tipping for things they'd never had before. And with the rise of remote transactions, the percentage of people who tipped were given the option skyrocketed 46% to 86% in January 2022. Businesses who lost a lot of customers during the pandemic were looking for alternative ways to make up that income, and asking for tips was one way to do it. And even as things started to open up again, the tip request hasn't gone away. One reason consumers feel pressured to tip more is because they're being asked to tip before service completion. It's almost like a bribe. I'm afraid not to tip you because with the work you'd be doing right now would be less good than if I did. This can be particularly concerning in situations where safety is at stake, like a mechanic repairing your car. So it's no wonder that people are feeling the pressure to tip more nowadays. When technology advances, so does the tipping game. With the introduction of kiosks and tablets in restaurants and businesses, they're now able to suggest the tipping amounts right in front of your faces. But here's the catch. Those 3 large tipping suggestions are actually chosen by the business, and those suggested tips are no joke. I mean, have you seen 15% minimum for a quick takeout? Sometimes it even starts at 20, 25, and even goes up to 30%. No wonder people feel the pressure to tip more when they normally would. According to a 2022 creditcards.com survey, 22% of respondents said they feel more compelled to tip with the normative range price presented to them. It's like the more you ask, the more you get. 3 companies are leading the charge with the trendy, sleek point-of-sale systems are Square, Toast, and Clover. They launched over a decade ago and help businesses run faster, smarter, and easier. With features like inventory and employee management and fewer fees to accept multiple credit cards, they've made it easier for small merchants to process credit card payments. Square, in particular, has done an outstanding job, and it's been a tremendous growth story. In fact, half of their business today is processing credit card payments. So do these companies deserve some credit for the tipping frenzy we're experiencing? I'd say they definitely play a role in helping restaurants gather more tips. From the good old days of tossing coins into the tip jar, we've come a long way. Nowadays, we have fancy tablets that turn not tipping into an active choice rather than a passive one. The buttons on screen make us choose whether or not to leave a tip, instead of just letting us overlook the jar, so to speak. This new feature can be customized or disabled by the merchant. From a business perspective, this motivates employees to perform better and make more money. It's a investment software, and sometimes it's worth it. Starbucks, even a mammoth as it is, realized the importance of tipping screen when it rolled out its stores back in September of 2022. If customers feel resentful, they won't come back. That's why business owners need to weigh the pros and cons of having a tipping screen. With so many services to tip for these days, people might start to get tired of it, and tips could essentially decrease. It's a real danger to business owners that they should keep in mind. The pandemic and its aftermath have wreaked havoc on the livelihood of servers in sit-down restaurants. Amidst the slew of fees that restaurants have instituted, servers are bearing the brunt of it. As more fees are added onto bills, customers are growing increasingly wary of tipping. What once was a discretionary act has now become a form of penalty. With inflation rates skyrocketing and incessant prompts for tips, it's no wonder that customers are growing wary. In fact, in 2022, a study found that 17% of Americans were tipping less because of inflation. But it's not all bad news for servers. A study found that 10% of customers reported tipping more. However, the trend towards getting rid of tipping altogether seems to be on the rise. More than half of Americans, or 60%, are in favor of just doing away with the tipping entirely. As for the pandemic-inspired generosity, the numbers have taken a hit. In 2022, 43% of consumers typically tipped servers 20% or more, opposed to 56% of consumers in 2021. The situation is dire for servers, and it remains to be seen whether they will ever regain the level of tipping they once enjoyed. It can genuinely hurt the people who truly rely on gratuities for their livelihood. I firmly believe that the tipping invasion we're experiencing right now is a net negative for society. And with that tablet on just about every single counter, no matter where you go, the question is, where is the tipping point? How long before I'm tipping my doctor for the annual physical? If you want to seem especially generous after an exceptional meal, you might decide to go big and tip 30%, but it's a cycle. As more people are seeking to make a good impression, their tips are up to 30%, maybe even 35%. At that point, what becomes a generous tip? I have to believe that tips are going up from where they are today, but I also think that there has to be a logical ceiling somewhere. We just don't know where it is.